big burgers. Yeah, lots of space in this mall.
Welcome to Hollywood Stuntmakers. On this episode, we'll meet the people who risk their necks to keep you in stitches as we take a behind-the-scenes look at comedy stunts and effects. We'll learn how a comet chase scene is staged. We'll examine the role of special effects in comedy, and we'll discuss the history of physical comedy in a rare interview with the legendary producer, Hal Roach. All this and more on Hollywood Stuntmakers. These pioneers of physical comedy combined amazing stunt work and flawless comic timing to produce films that still make us laugh today. In this sequence from the 1923 silent film Safety Last, Harold Lloyd had audiences rolling in the aisles without uttering a word. Lloyd was a master of making the most difficult stunt look easy, and this one certainly wasn't. If Lloyd appears to be climbing a real skyscraper, well, that's because he was. The scene took 6 weeks to shoot. Afterward, Lloyd tossed a dummy into a pile of mattresses on a ledge 30 feet below just to see what would have happened if he'd fallen. The dummy bounced off the mattresses, over the ledge, and fell another 20 stories to the ground below. In Steamboat Bill Jr., Buster Keaton made audiences laugh till their sides ached and wound up with more than a few bumps and bruises himself. Keaton was a fine athlete. Pound for pound, Keaton was considered one of the strongest men in show business. Charlie Chaplin is considered a master at physical comedy. Notice Chaplin's exaggerated movements and expressions. The one man who knew all the great pioneers of slapstick comedy is legendary producer Hal Roach.
Buster Keaton and I were very good friends for years. When he knocked the house down, he knocked the house down.
One of the most prolific producers in Hollywood history, Roach produced more than 50 films during a 23-year span. And Roach was personally responsible for honing the comedic skills of Harold Lloyd.
Harold Lloyd was not a comedian. Harold Lloyd was one of the best actors I ever knew.
Hal Roach first noticed Harold Lloyd's ability while working as extras for Universal Studios. It was only natural that the two would later team up to make some of the funniest films ever produced.
And then when I started making pictures, the first person I wanted was Harold. I taught him to be a comedian. I taught him to be the character that he played. Next to Chaplin, he was the biggest. In the whole time that he was with me, he never said, "What do I do next?" He said, "What does he do next? What are we doing?" And then one thing that he did was great for him. Any time that there wasn't a laugh in the scene, he'd say, "Hal, what do I do to make him laugh?"
In addition to his work with Lloyd, Roach also created the Our Gang comedies and the most famous comedy team of all times, Laurel and Hardy. While stuntmen and women make them laugh with hilarious chase scenes and pratfalls, special effects technicians have a hand in comedy also. In the 1982 release Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and Harold Ramis had to contend with a playful poltergeist. This floating apparition, known as Slimer, was originally nicknamed Onion Head by its creators at Voss Film Studios. Here's Voss Film president and four-time Oscar winner, Richard Edlund.
The Onion Head was a particularly fun project, and basically the way we did the Onion Head was basically a man in a suit. And it was a pretty interesting design because we had the the Onion Head with this. We had a mime artist who had, who had his arm sticking out of this big green head, and it was painted with the most hideous green paint we could possibly find. It's like the same kind of thing you'd use for rafts at sea that you could see from 50 miles, So it was a mime artist that was actually giving him his body language, and then his eyebrows and cheeks and mouth, and there was a tongue. There was a tongue that was operated by hand for certain shots.
It's right here, right? It's looking at me.
He's an ugly little spud, isn't he?
I think he can hear you, Ray.
Don't move.
He slimed me.
That's great! Actual physical contact!
The question which is in our mind is, what does the audience think a ghost looks like? In other words, there's kind of a universal perception of what a ghost is. And so we tried to approach it, somewhat intellectually. And that's how we wound up getting to the various characters in the movie. And we would argue, that's not funny, or that is corny, or, and the discussions are probably funnier than the joke itself. When you have Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Rick Moranis, you don't have much of a problem with funniness, because these guys are hilarious guys.
What the hell are you doing?
Sorry. I'm sorry. We thought you were someone else.
From a ghost that gobbles down sausages to a disembodied hand that walks, special effects make audiences believe the impossible.
The challenge of making the Thing hands look real for the Addams Family wasn't that we had to have exact, perfect, realistic movements in all the hands. There were quite a few obstacles. We had to make everything self-contained, which means there's no way we could put cables running out of them to operate them. They all had to be little micro-miniature mechanics and everything that would fit inside a normal human hand. We had to do 5 different models of the Thing. They each did different things. One of them reached up and grabbed a doorknob and turned it. One was pulling a wagon. And they were all in different positions. So one was just, they wanted a hand that they could just place anywhere. They could always keep it on set, and if they wanted to put it somewhere, like in the background or like off to the side of somebody, they could do that, and the fingers would move on it. Just kind of sitting there, moving around. My favorite scene in the Addams Family involving Thing was the one pulling the wagon. I thought it was a good idea, because at that point they all had to leave the house. They're all being kicked out and evicted. So he was pulling his wagon. He had all his belongings in the wagon, which were like, it was all things that had to do with hands, like gloves and rings and lotions and things like that. Coordinating where the hand runs through between the cars in the street was very difficult, because they didn't drive, the stunt people didn't drive the same each time. They were either a little slower or a little faster, and I was trying to manipulate this in between the cars so it didn't get hit. And they were kind of moving a little fast, and here's this, like thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of work, like going through these cars. It was difficult to coordinate. I had no communication with the drivers or anything like that. They were told to start driving, and it was my job to manipulate it through them. And unfortunately, it didn't make it. It actually got run over, but we were able to repair it, so they were able to save the scene. When it comes off as looking real and it moves perfectly, then it's so rewarding. I've actually created this thing from scratch. I mean, from nothing, just from clay, sculpting, and pieces of rubber, and here I've made this believable character. It's just completely rewarding.
Hollywood comedies have always drawn from the vaudeville tradition of slapstick.
Jesus Christ, son of a bitch! Oh, you bastard!
In this scene from the Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi prove that falling down can knock them dead. But performing comedic stunts like that can be a dangerous business. To better illustrate, let's find out how comedic pratfalls are staged. Stuntman Dennis Mataloni has been performing dangerous stunts for over 18 years. His vast experience has taught him that the key to any successful stunt is careful planning and having the right equipment.
Well, the way we staged the fall on this particular stairs, Julie's our stunt coordinator. We talked about me rolling down the first half, which is 10 feet, and because it's such a weird turn, I had to kiss off the wall and then try to make the turn and make it look natural and then fall down the last half. The last half, the easiest, making that turn was the tough spot. The most concerned part about doing a stair fall like this one is making sure that you can fit down the stairs and you don't catch a foot in the rail. And other than that, you just got to pretty much tough it out because you're going to get bruised up and get the air knocked out of you. So you got to wear the right kind of equipment, good pads, good plastic pads, and tailbones and stuff like that. You know, these are like the new pads. I guess about 20 years ago, they just used to use, you know, soft material. Now they got plastic, which takes the curse out of, you know, hitting concrete. So you do go over it in your mind and you go through the motions of it, but it's really, when the cameras roll, it's just you and the stairs and, you know, you got to beat it down there and not get bruised up so much.
From the old westerns to the comedies of today, few things produce more laughs than a comedic fight scene. This scene from Airplane demonstrates the tremendous planning and preparation that goes into every fight scene. And what would a barroom brawl be without a lot of broken furniture? This scene from Airplane may look painful for the stunt woman involved, but breakaway props help assure that it isn't. This is the Universal Studios Prop House, where a stuntman can pick up anything from a breakaway chair to a rubber hammer. Physical comedy would be a lot more dangerous if not for professionals like Universal Studios prop master Dennis Stewart.
In a fight scene in a movie, these are breakaway items. It's made of a lightweight material called balsa wood, which, much for its weight, much for its fragility, very fragile material. Very lightweight. Even though they look solid, and once painted, they look legit, they aren't very strong. As you can see through the bottom of this, it is balsa wood, but it's just a paper seat. And even to further weaken an item like this when they use it, they'll score the bottom approximately a ½ inch to 3/4 through it, so it's very weak, very fragile. This is the breakaway glass room here at Universal. We make basically any type product that will break on cue, so to speak. The way we make a breakaway glass is once the material is prepared, and it is in its moldable state, and then you dump your excess material out of the mold. The material then coating the mold, giving you the shape of the mold. And once it's drained off, it'll take it just a couple of minutes to cool down. What you attempt to do is to make it look as real as you can get it.
After trimming off the excess and cooling the materials with a wet towel, the breakaway glass is ready to be removed from the mold.
And once it's cooled down to where it will separate from the mold, you remove your actual part from the mold. You heat them up a little bit and reseal the top of it to give it a surface, and you have a finished product. And once the finished product has been molded, cleaned, and prepared to go, it is ready for action.
Well, that's our look at comedy stunts and effects. Comedians say that timing is everything. Well, we're out of time. So that's a wrap, and we'll see you next time on Hollywood Stuntmakers.